Markets are down significantly. Is it time to bargain hunt? Is it time to buy Tesla, Apple, or Amazon? Well, I'll show you how to answer that question and give you my answer, plus provide my analysis of the markets. Is the crash over? And finally, look at the day trade of the week on CHWY. So, buying strong companies when their stock prices are down historically has been a great idea. Stock market crashes create opportunity to buy bargains in good companies. And so if we think about some of the leading companies of the last few years, Apple comes to mind, Tesla, and of course Amazon, there's many others. The question is, with the recent weakness, is it time to buy them now? Well, you have to differentiate between being on sale and trying to catch a falling knife. And the time frame that you want to trade has a big effect on the answer. So, is it time to buy these stocks? Well, let's take a look at some charts, and I'll tell you first of all what I look for, and also show you specifically with those stocks whether they're good enough or not. So here is the Stockscores website. I'm going to punch in, let's start with Apple. So what I want to see is a break of a downward trend line from a rising bottom. I talk about that all the time with the overall market. You can use the same technique with individual stocks. However, what can be different is that the time frame you trade can have an effect. So if you are a long-term investor, you should be looking for a break of the downward trend line from a rising bottom on the weekly chart. If you're what we call a position trader, where you maybe hold for a few months, look for a downward trend from a rising bottom on the daily chart. And if you're a swing trader, then you can do that on the 30-minute chart, let's say. All right, and obviously if you're a swing trader, you're going to be in and out in a few days. You have a different time horizon than that long-term investor who might hold for a year. So let's take a look here at Apple. And what I want to highlight is the last time this happened. When was the last time we had a break of the downward trend line from a rising bottom? And you can see the line that I've just drawn here. That's your downward trend line that was in place through the spring. And here is the rising bottom. So the stock pulled back, but it did not go as low as the previous pullback. And that is what gives us the rising bottom. And then we broke the downward trend line right there. That was at around $142 a share, and it ran up to $175 a share. So, 20-25% gain in the course of maybe a month. So now let's think about what's happening now on Apple. You can see that we are still in the downward trend. We have the potential to build a rising bottom because this low is currently higher than here, but we still have to break the downward trend from the rising bottom. So my answer to the question, is it time to buy Apple? No, not on the daily time frame. Now let's go take a look at the intraday time frame. So I'm going to go 1 month, 30-minute chart on my chart here. And again, I can draw a line, start at the high, and just let the line fall until it hits the tops. And you can see that the downward trend line is still in place. We had a little bit of strength this week, but we did not break the downward trend line. So even for a swing trader, there was no reason to buy Apple this past week. Okay, let's use Tesla as an example. So TSLA, and you can see that on the daily chart, I'm still in a downward trend. The last downward trend was here. It broke the downward trend line from a rising bottom back there, went up a little bit, never really did all that great. What about in the very long-term time frame? What if I go 3-year chart? I can see some examples where this happened. I had a downward trend line there. So back in late 2020 and into 2021, on the weekly time frame, it built a downward trend line. It then broke from a rising bottom and went from $240 a share to $400 a share. It's pretty good for 3 months. Do we have that now on this time frame? No, we're not even close to breaking that long-term downward trend line. What about on the very short term? Let's go 1 month, 30-minute chart. And this is what I love about our Stockscores charts, is you can quickly change those time frames, and that's no accident because that's a key component of my trading strategies. Look at multiple time frames. All right, here is the downward trend line on that short-term chart. Have we broken it? No. Have we even built a rising bottom yet? No. How about Amazon? AMZN. You can do this with any stock you want. In fact, we'll do it on an oil stock just for fun because oil might be turning around a little bit. So here's Amazon, daily chart time frame. Take my line, start at the high, let it fall where it hits the next inflection point, and it's right there. I could probably even draw it like that and just not worry about that one day that was above. But do we have a break of that line? No. Do we have a build of a rising bottom? No. Was there a break earlier in the week? A little bit. We did have the downward trend line broken right there, but is that a rising bottom? That bottom is lower than the previous one. So that's a no. And it's a good thing because it failed, didn't it? All right, let's try, I don't know, let's try ExxonMobil. Just take a big US oil company. And let's look at the 1 month chart there. Here we had a downward trend. This is the 2-hour chart, okay? 30-day 2-hour. We broke the downward trend line on October 3rd. That low is higher than the previous low, so that met our requirements for a swing trader. $90 on October 3rd. Today it's 101 in 4 days. That's, better than a 10% gain, probably 13% gain in 4 days, using something that anyone can do if you have a pencil and a ruler or if you want to draw lines on the chart. By the way, if you want to know how to draw the lines like I do, that's a free app that you can get from Microsoft. The app is called Zoom It, and you can just download it and draw lines on your charts, no cost. All right. Okay, let's get into our regular weekly market analysis. We'll start with the US markets. So let's jump into SPY. SPY. Have we broken the downward trend line? Nope. Do we potentially building a rising bottom? Yes. If we were to move up starting Monday and break that downward trend line, we'd have a break from a rising bottom. We don't have that yet, so we need to be fairly cautious. 1 month chart, we tried to break the downward trend line. Well, we did break it, but there was no rising bottom. So now can we build a rising bottom here and then break this one? That's what to watch for. Until then, be bearish on US stocks. Canadian stocks, T.XIU, they're going to be a little better than US because of the oil market has been improving the last week or so. And here we go. Double bottom, downward trend line. Haven't broken it. Could build a rising bottom, but it's still, the trend is down. Therefore, we have to be bearish. If we look at the 1 month chart, it's trying to bottom. You can see that we actually broke this downward trend line from a little bit of a rising bottom there. So I'm going to give this more of a neutral rating. TSX looks a little better than the US markets. Let's try some of the other US markets. Let's just look at the NASDAQ. Okay, ugly at the lows, no break of a downward trend line. How about the small caps? IWM, nope. Tried to break the downward trend line this week, got up to it, got stuck. So still has work to do. Trying, but it hasn't broken the downward trend line yet. What about the junior markets in Canada? Dollar JX is the TSX Venture. You can see that it is still in a downward trend line. It could build a rising bottom and break, hasn't done it yet, so we still remain bearish. All right, how about currencies? Let's take a look at the US dollar, which is obviously the major one, and you see the upward trend is in place. This is an upward sloping channel, and it's getting a little extended. I still think it needs to pull back a bit, but certainly hasn't broken down, hasn't broken the upward trend line. What about Bitcoin? Let's take a look. GBTC is the Bitcoin ETF. It's at the lows here. To me, I think it's more likely to go lower than higher. I would stay away. In the very short term, it's actually had a little bit of stability. Tried, but this move on Friday, pushing it down toward those lows is not a good sign. Interest rates. So for that, I'm going to do TBT. What's the trend? So simple. Draw a line. Trend is up. Until the trend is broken, interest rates look more likely to go higher than lower. Commodities. Let's try gold. Gold had a little bit of strength last week. There's your downward trend line. We've risen up to it. Okay, good sign there, but we're coming off of a low, not off of a rising bottom. We're getting rejected at the trend line, so likely to pull back. hopefully build a rising bottom, and then try to break. If it does, then I'll be a little more optimistic, but for now, fairly pessimistic. Now, in the very short term, so let's look at the 1 month chart. You can see that we've had some strength of late, so I would call this more of a neutral chart. It's been going sideways over the last month. How about oil? USO. Okay, USO has broken the downward trend line, but there's no rising bottom. So if it can pull back and then build a rising bottom and start to go up again, that's good. And by the way, that's an important point. It doesn't have to be in that order. I mean, I say break the downward trend line from a rising bottom. It could break the downward trend line first, then build a rising bottom, and then start to move up again. So that's always another way for this to work out. And then the final thing that we're going to talk about is the fear chart. And the fear chart is the VIX, UVXY is a good one to look at. And you can see that fear is starting to break a downward trend line, almost there, and it's built a rising bottom. So fear is increasing, and that could point to another wave of selling in the stock market. It hasn't happened yet, but this is an important chart this week, so let's keep an eye on this. If it starts to rise up here, we could get a bit more of a fear-based sell-off early next week even, and that would, of course, mean the market moves to new lows, and something like this starts to move up, and that's one way to make money from a falling, crashing stock market. All right, US stocks bearish in both time frames. Canadian, I've gone neutral short term. Gold, neutral short term. That's an upgrade. Oil, neutral long term and bullish short term. We are starting to see some life come back to oil as it bounces off of that 3-year weekly upward trend line. US dollar, bullish on both time frames. Bitcoin, I remain bearish, and interest rates, bullish. All right, now let's get into the day trade of the week. Even though the market has been pretty soft of late, there's some day trades just about every day. And particularly on the days when the market moves up from the open, it's actually been decent for day trading. And that's because you can get those rising bottoms intraday. Even though the market's been going down for weeks or months, you still have stocks that can perform well. So this is one that I found on Wednesday. It is a stock that was trading abnormal volume, came alive, all of the things we like to see, all the things I teach in the Active Trader course, which you can learn more about at stockscores.com. There's the action candle right there, breaking a pullback. So that's a strategy I have called a pullback play. And it made the entry right there. And if you just held until the end of the day, these are the economics. So for $100 of risk, you buy 400 shares, a little more capital intensive than a lot of the trades we do. This one required a little better than $13,800 of capital. Margin, if you take that and divide by 3, you basically have to put up $4,600 of capital. Made an 8 RR gain, so an $800 gain on a $4,600 capital requirement. That's a 17% return on a 1-day hold. Hope you've enjoyed this week's Market Minutes. If so, click the like button. Do you think we're going to crash through the lows and move to new lows, or are we going to build the rising bottom and break the downward trend line? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Click on that notifications bell so that you get an update when I've uploaded a new video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and trade well.